This podcast was brought to you by the Umbrella Corporation. People said that we were crazy, and they were right. Call us Rob Zombie!
Hello, and welcome to Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show with me, the Jonin Monkey.
And me, Sven the Crusader.
And here we are in the month of October. Halloween draws near, which means absolutely nothing to us. I mean, even if we did release this on Halloween, it never means anything to us. I mean, I'm not a big horror fan. I wouldn't know what to do. I mean, spookiness, I guess?
I mean, I'm a fan of Stephen King, but I haven't been able to have candy in 8 years, so what's the point?
Well, I think I've only ever been in the city once in Halloween. Everything else, it's just been staring at the empty fields.
Staring at the empty fields. Watching the motion of the grass, wondering if Slender Man is having a tea party.
The funny thing is, I still have no idea who the hell Slender Man is.
Please never do.
Alrighty then. And on that warning, it's time for us to move into our first section, which is...
Q&A! With dead things and stuff.
Spooky, scary skeletons.
Yeah, this Halloween theme is definitely not forced in any way at all. This is the section where we answer questions from the audience. If you'd like us to answer your questions, either leave them in the comments or send them to me via Twitter with the hashtag MBQuestion.
Our first question comes from Vice.
How do you feel about competitive Super Smash Bros?
That noise.
Yeah. I will admit there was a time when I would have agreed with Sven 100%. I've kind of softened to it over the years, because... Okay, well, let me be blunt. I had some very bad experiences back in the days when Melee was popular. Basically, I got into one too many arguments about tiers with some people, and I was eventually left the forum because I thought, sod this, I do not need this kind of negativity, especially about what is essentially a very simplistic fighting game. But I will admit, I have watched one or two competitive matches and learned a little bit more about the competitive scene, and I'm in a phase where I wouldn't say I'm enamored by it, but I can see why people enjoy it, and I'm not going to poo-poo someone who wants to have fun. Although, admittedly, I am still very much against the idea of tiers, especially since, well... I can understand that a game may not be entirely balanced and some things are going to work out better than others, especially when Super Smash Bros. By the creator's own admission isn't usually designed for the competitive esports type play. But having said all that, when I found out that the tiers were based purely on tournament results and nothing else, I just kind of ended up staring at it thinking, yeah, these are a load of shit.
Yeah, that's my issue. Just in general with metagaming, the scene drains the fun out of any fandom it touches, and typically the people who perpetuate it, especially Smash fans, I'm talking mostly, of course, about the quote-unquote professional Smash players here, most of them tend to be raging dick waffles.
There are one or two nice guys, but yeah, it does kind of invoke this attitude of superiority, especially since I actually did watch a video where someone tried to explain the importance of tiers, because I thought, okay, I'm probably not going to agree with them, but I want to try and at least understand where they're coming from, because, you know, I always think it's good to at least get that aspect rather than assuming the worst of people, but their logic was, if you pick a low-tier character to fight against someone, then you are disrespecting that person, because when you lose, you can just turn around and say, oh, I was using a low-tier character, and so it doesn't count. Firstly, anyone who turns around and says that is probably not a qualified judge of skill. If someone turns around and just goes, oh yeah, it's just a character, the one I picked, their opinion is worthless, okay?
Right?
Second, really? That's what the justification of tiers is? Your own ego? That's really what it is?
Yeah, that's basically the sum of it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna admit, there have been some competitive Smash battles that are incredibly fun to watch, but I will admit, the ones I have taken a bit too much pleasure in are the ones where basically the tier list gets thrown on its head. Like, I love the fact that this year's winner was Hungry Box, who won with Jigglypuff, who suspiciously has gone up the tier ranking since then. Can't imagine why.
See what I mean? Not only does metagaming drain the fun out of any fandom it touches, one win can also jig the system.
Basically, yeah. I mean, it's not just Smash Bros, admittedly, to be fair. I feel the same way about the Pokemon Championships, which is why I loved it when Seijun Park, in a tournament that was just swamped with Garchomps, Landorus's, etc., etc., he still had a Pachirisu in his front lines and was able to kick ass of it.
Wow.
Like, this is a Pachirisu that stood up to a Draco Meteor, and with the help of a berry, a Leaf Storm from a Rotom, for God's sake.
Okay, I'm impressed.
So, yeah, that's my summary. I am perfectly fine with competitive Smash and competitive gaming, because, yeah, everyone onto their own doodah, as my mother would say, but at the same time, I still question tier lists and people who swear by them, so...
I have had so many bad experiences, especially with Smash fans, and especially with Smash fans trying to apply their tier list to Fire Emblem, that I am turned off of competitive play forever.
I can fully understand that, admittedly. Okay, moving swiftly on, our second question comes from Roy Havenstone, and he asks...
Has the likes-dislike culture of social media affected how you, as reviewers, look at review scores?
No. I can answer that question for myself here and now because, well, let me put it to you like this. Radiant Dawn got a 6.8 from GameSpot, and I can safely say that has not affected my opinion of the game any.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I asked Roy for some clarification on this, and he was wondering if there was any correlation between the time when YouTube swapped from its former star system to the like-dislike system because videos tended to be in either one extreme or the other, like it would either be 1-star reviews or 5-star reviews, and around the same time people were questioning the merit of review scores. I agree it happened around a similar time, but I think that was generated more by the extreme backlash some people were giving to towards scores, like how people were overreacted to Grand Theft Auto 5 not getting 10s out of 10s across the board, especially when, I'm going to say, sites like Metacritic have not helped. I get why they exist, but the fact that fans are now basically hoping for every single review to be 10 out of 10 simply to have it be higher in the overall tally is frankly kind of sad. I'm not going to...
Yeah, I could add on to that, but instead what I'll do is point everyone in the direction of Jim Sterling's wine out of 10.
In what f***ing world is a score of 9 bad? Oh, when it's GTA, how f***ing bloody sad. I mean, for f***'s sake, it's a 9 out of 10. All games should kill for such praise, silly men. So good job on sharing your dumb verbal tics, and making your fave game look designed for dicks, and showing what spoiled brats gamers can be when perfect praise is all that you want to see. And the saddest damn thing is that 6 months from now, you'll look back on all these big 9s and ask how much Rockstar had paid us for these scores, because you think the game sucks, and you'll call us cashors.
I think also a lot of it had to do with the fact that, well, some reviewers were getting annoyed at the fact that people were just skipping to the score and completely ignoring the context. The only correlation, I will say, between the like-dislike culture and review scores is that it encourages this weird mentality that's spread around the internet where you can only talk in extremes all the damn time. It is kind of twisted when you think about it. Like, you can have 9 out of 10, but in a gamer's mind, 9 and 10 are the only ones that matter. In some cases, only 10. Anything below that, not worth a glance. Which I feel is kind of a detriment, because sometimes there are things which... Fragile Dream, one of the reasons I've had such a hard time getting my thoughts out to review that damn thing is because That is a game I love and hate at the same time. Same with Undertale. There are parts of it I love and parts of it I hate. It's not as simple as going, pick one, you know?
Yeah. And what's funny about Radiant Dawn is, I would actually probably give that game about the same as that site did. 6.8, maybe 7 out of 10, but it's for entirely different reasons. I mean, we've been over this. I, for the most part, like the plot, but I think that parts 3 and 4 were fueled by moon logic. That would be my gripe with it. And I think, honestly, when you get down to it, the fact that gaming culture has now decided that 10 out of 10 is all that matters is just about the worst detriment there can be, and I point you once again to my opinion of Pokemon hipsters in the last MB.
Yeah, that's kind of the overall sum of it. I don't think it's really affected how people look at review scores so much as it has looking at the way people digest reviews and indeed opinions in general, I think, because personally I think that needs to calm down a little. I think it would be better for people to read context, because honestly, I have bought plenty of games that were 6s and 7s and really enjoyed the heck out of them because I read the reviews and actually decided whether or not I had an issue with what they were saying rather than just taking the score at face value.
Yeah, exactly that, basically. And just to touch one more time on the like-dislike culture, when it comes to applying that to reviewing reviews or viewing videos, I'll admit that I have fallen prey to that. That I've given, say, certain videos with really high dislike scores the side eye. But the thing is, you really have to stop and digest what you're looking at. In the case of a video, you have to watch through it. In case it's like, oh, this YouTuber is talking about a very important social thing, but it has so many dislikes. Is it a bad video? Nope, it was just mass dislike by neo-Nazis. So, basically, form your own opinions.
Yeah, definitely.
Our next question comes from IZ.
What do you think are some good examples of darkness-induced audience apathy?
Straight out the gate, Jonin, shall we say it in unison?
Game of Thrones.
I think we brought up why.
Yeah, I mean, we may not have entirely agreed on the plot, but admittedly, the part of the whole darkness apathy is intentional. Whether or not that makes for good viewing is up to the people to decide, so...
Yeah, likewise, I would also like to bring up an old manga companion of mine, Berserk.
Oh.
I'm not gonna hammer on it or the people who like it, but my god, Berserk! I never thought that I would ever encounter a series more grim than Game of Thrones, but the author of Berserk certainly managed it.
Yeah, what little I've heard of it, yeah, there was some pretty twisted stuff in it.
Yeah, that's to say the least. Griffith makes Gregor Clegane and Ramsay Snow look like saints. I get that Berserk has some good storytelling behind it and actual talent thrown into it, unlike Game of Thrones, but it's just so high-octane grimdark that I, as a writer and reader, just can't immerse myself in it.
That is fair enough. I think another example is actually something I was a big fan of in my teen years, and it may be a blast from the past for some people listening to this, Animorphs.
I never expected to hear that series mentioned in the same context as darkness-induced audience apathy. Please go on.
Well, here's the thing. The early books, and especially the low-budget TV series, they were going with the whole 5 kids who have the power to turn into animals fighting these evil mind control aliens. And for a while it was a very simplistic tone, you know, kid audience and everything. But K.A. Applegate was a big fan of slipping grim dark into it. Like, she used the fact that when you morph into animal form and back into human and vice versa, it repairs any injuries you've done, to get away with a lot of dismemberment. Like, there is actually a joke on this good blog that reviews the entire series called Cinnamon Buns. They have this running joke of needing a counter for how many times Marco's intestines get ripped out of him as a gorilla.
Oh my god!
And it then leads into K.A. Applegate in the very last quarter of the series decides to completely upend the whole old superhero fantasy by basically making it so that the characters go through PTSD and war guilt. No, I am not making this up.
Wow.
To the point where the pairing that was established throughout the series, Jake and Cassie, that eventually doesn't work out, mainly because they butt head over several decisions they made towards the end, and Jake is so guilt-ridden by everything that's happened, he becomes distant, and it takes a lot of counselling for him to get out of that.
Well, I mean, it's realistic, but my god!
So yeah, that would be another example of darkness-induced audience apathy by design.
Wow! That... I knew Animorphs as a fixture of my childhood that I never read, mind you, but I just knew it as a silly fixture of my childhood, and I'm a little amazed.
Yeah, it got surprisingly dark when we went back and reread it. Mind you, there's still a lot of incredibly stupid stuff in there as well.
Well, I mean, apparently the running mindset is that if it's aimed toward children, you can get away with it being stupid, but you know.
Yeah, well, there are times when it keeps slipping back between, like, this well-written sci-fi with loads of great alien cultures and incredibly dark moments, versus incredibly stupid stuff that happened for the sake of it, like aliens armed with a shrink ray, a mutated human culture living underneath the sea, and, well, it can also be summed up by a sentence that appears in one book. This is a direct quote. And then the Drago beam blew up the buffalo.
Oh, so basically it's Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who.
Actually, yeah, that is a good point.
I mean, I hate to insult Animorphs in such a way, but that's all I can think of for comparison.
Yeah, it's kind of like Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who, only without the incessant need for world building and actually setting up a good chunk of its plot devices.
Well, at least it has that.
Oh dear. But yeah, moving on to Infinity Zero's second question.
Have there been any exceptionally dumb, cruel, or otherwise sick moments that were enough to get you to give up on a series entirely? Game of Thrones doesn't count.
Damn it!
I think he was prepared for that one.
Well, since I've just mentioned it, all I'll say is the eclipse scene from Berserk. That shit will haunt my dreams until the day I pass from this mortal plane.
Yeah, there are two examples I can think of at the top of my head. The first was South Park, which admittedly it's this is only technically counted because it didn't get me to give up on the series entirely. I mean, only drop it for several years, then come back to it for a bit, and then just leave it. All I'll say is Scott Tenorman, and leave it at that.
Fair enough. I mean, probably I'll have to look into that on Wikipedia, because I'm the sort of person who thinks that the rivalry of Family Guy and South Park is more or less a rivalry between Ebola and anthrax. So I am not at all familiar with either of them, and I have no desire to be, but I'll take your word for it.
Okay. The main example, though, is a manga I've mentioned a couple of times, Fairy Tail.
Oh god. I know where this is going.
Yeah, I've already mentioned before, and I think it was in fact another question by Infinity Zero, that one of the biggest examples of the anticlimax I've ever seen was the Magic Tournament art, which was dumb and stupid. But other than that, and the really rushed resolution of the whole dragon apocalypse that was supposed to happen and yet turned out to be a damn squib, I decided to continue watching it, but more in the same basis of Bleach, that it was gonna be a guilty pleasure, that I was more or less reading it just to make fun of it. And then, okay, I forget the exact name of it, and frankly I don't care, but shortly after it there was an arc where demons started to invade. It was getting to be pretty cool, it was putting our heroes in some tough situations, and even managing to take out Luxus, which, that was a pretty impressive, and it made me think that they were a credible threat. However, one of the things they also did was the demons kidnapped one of the female leads, Urza, who is basically the equivalent of Kenpachi in the series, not in terms of personality, but in terms of the fact that she shows up and usually wins a battle through sheer badassery, and admittedly some arse pulls, but generally wins with some badassery to The demons have this habit of stripping all of their prisoners naked. They do this with male prisoners as well, admittedly only one, but that's beside the point. Then they decide that they also want to get some secrets out of Urza as well, so they start torturing her. Now, bad guys torturing heroes, it can go a bit too far and show an uncomfortable side of the author, but that I can usually get behind. Villains do villainous things, that's not the worst thing. I mean, there was a torture scene in Animals, and I was okay with that, even if it was traumatizing.
Basically, so long as they don't cross over into Ramsay Snow and Theon Greyjoy territory.
Yeah, but unfortunately, this one did in a kind of creepy way, because Hero cannot stop being Hero. Despite the fact that this is essentially one of your female leads being drugged and electrocuted and in some cases whipped, he still has to make you perfectly aware that she has this perfect figure and making it so that she is posing in slightly evocative ways, which is just fucking creepy. Like, there is a time and a place for fan service, and I can pretty assure you this is not it.
Yeah, we've been over this, and that is some George R.R. Martin territory right there. Actually, no. George R.R. Martin has an amazing ability to portray anything as unattractive. That is some D.B. Weiss and Dan Benioff right there.
Yeah, so that pretty much made me give up on this series. I mean, I tried and continued for a little bit, seeing if it justifies it, but then there was an entire chapter dedicated to these two characters going to sacrifice themselves, making a decision of the only way we can clear the bomb is to detonate it right now before it reaches its destination. We have been great friends for so long. I'm glad to do this. The bomb explodes, and then a couple of panels later it reveals that they've been rescued and everything's fine, and I just thought, okay, that's it for this.
I thought the Digin was bad in Bleach. By the way, speaking of completely misplaced fan service, once again the Eclipse scene in Berserk.
Part of me wants to ask, but I fear I will not like the results.
Let me put it to you this way. Imagine the scene you just described to me, except way, way, way more explicit, and with hentai level quality.
And on that note,
our last question from IZ reads, and I swear I thought this was too junky at first.
Lord Beerus appears on your doorstep and demands a meal. If he doesn't like it, he'll destroy the Earth. What do you make him?
This is what I would do. I would set it up to make it look like I was preparing the most perfect of BLTs. I would sneak inside my house, get Dr. Doom on the phone, and have him deal with the situation.
I would be pretty much screwed, because I'm the sort of person who wouldn't think of that plan, and in my case, the only thing I can cook are omelettes and pancakes. And pasta. I can make that.
Man, best bust out the eggs and throw in some prime steak and mushrooms. What a phrase! What a phrase!
That's gonna be the Earth's only hope if I have to cook the literal last meal of the entire planet. Anyway.
A steak, egg, and cheese omelet. The world comes down to riding on an omelet. Again, what a phrase!
Indeed. And now, to close this section off, we have the question from Toon Junkie himself, and this one is suitably Halloween themed.
Who is that guy standing behind you? And why is he holding a knife?
Wait, what? Oh, it's just one of my characters upset that I killed their family.
Yeah, I can't think of anything better for that. Okay. On that note, that concludes the Q&A session for Monkey Broadcast. As always, thank you for sending the questions. It makes this section a lot of fun. But now, it's time for us to move on to the next section, which is...
Reviews! That are slowly turning you into a werewolf.
This is gonna be the theme, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. This is the section where we review something we've read, watched, or played. And for this month, I'm going to be looking at something kind of special. See, this is technically the first ever fan donation I've ever had to review.
Really?
Yeah. Just completely out of nowhere, one of the people who watched this show, decided on my birthday to send me two additional birthday gifts for the idea of maybe reviewing them on the show. The first was a video game, which I'm going to keep under wraps for a moment, mainly because I'm trying to decide what to do with it. Plus, I also haven't had the time to play it beyond the first hour, but that's another point entirely. The second is a movie. More specifically, a movie based on a game that both me and Sven, come to think of it, have mentioned positively a couple of times. And he actually specifically said in the letter that came with it would be nice to have a comparison between this and the game. The movie in question? Heavenly Sword.
They made a movie of that?
Yeah, it completely threw me off too.
Count me up as dumbstruck.
Yeah, there was absolutely no fanfare made about there being a movie of it, so I was curious as to whether or not it was an underrated gem or something that deserved to be forgotten, but yeah, I should probably explain the premise of the game and by extension the movie. The game is based in how would you describe it? Fantasy medieval China?
Yeah, something like that. Pseudo-feudal Middle Ages China, kind of in the sense of Jade Empire?
Yeah, kind of fantasy martial arts more than anything else, but yeah. It's in this period, and it concerns a tribe that are guarding the Heavenly Sword, an artifact that was once used by a god to slay an evil deity, but ever since then it's also been known as a cursed item because anyone who picks it up will be powerful for a few days, then die horribly.
Yeah, pretty much.
This tribe also had a prophecy that they were really looking forward to, that in the year of the Fire Horse, a special chosen one will be born. A man who would be destined to lead the entire clan into a new age of prosperity and defeat evil once and for all. However, the prophecy didn't exactly come true, as there was a child with flaming red hair who was born on the prophecy, but it was a girl.
My favorite way to put a twist on a prophecy.
This child is our protagonist, Nariko, and unfortunately she has had to grow up with basically the entire tribe considering her to be a cursed omen and wanting nothing to do with her, basically.
Yeah, I seem to recall that. Man, you'd think this tribe would be less picky about their prophecies.
No, apparently they are extremely picky. But then all of that changes one day when a tyrannical evil overlord and possible man-child, Bohan,
And he's basically Garen with the voice of Andy Serkis.
Yeah, invades the clan's homeland and basically overwhelms their defences in the attempts to get the Heavenly Sword. Nariko and Shen try to run away with it, but most of the tribe are captured, and Bohan eventually corners Nariko and tells her, "Give me the sword or everyone you know and love will die." Nariko decides to take option C and use the Heavenly Sword to attack Bohan. And so the story basically follows her and the only friend she has in the entire tribe, Kai, who is a rather special orphan, is the best way I can describe it.
Let's just say the word eccentric applies here.
In spades, yes.
Quirky might also be a fitting adjective.
If you're wondering how quirky, let me put it this way. She refers to filling people's heads with arrows as twing twang.
Let me rephrase, she has sailed out of Port Sensible on the SS Quirky.
Indeed, so Nariko and Kai are now teaming up using the Heavenly Sword to try and rescue their clansmen and defeat Bohan before eventually the curse takes her life. Now, admittedly, this is a very generic premise. Let's not beat around the bush on this one.
Yeah, I mean, in the words of Yahtzee, and I know I've more or less stopped quoting him ages ago, but his descriptor of Heavenly Sword is appropriate. Well, his descriptor of Nariko is appropriate. She's basically the lady equivalent of Kratos, except instead of being two melons strapped to a brick house, they're strapped to an egg noodle.
Yeah, she has a kind of overly elaborate hair design, but yeah, it is a very generic premise. I mean, yeah, the twist on the Chosen One angle is nice, but otherwise, it is a very standard clan defends magical sword from evil dude. But if there's one thing that I've learned, especially for both Heavenly Sword and Thunderbolt Fantasy, which I am intending to review on this podcast at some point, that even the most generic premise can come alive if you have a decent writer. In the game's case, this was the first breakout hit, I guess you could say, for Rhianna Pratchett, who would later go on to write Mirror's Edge, which, admittedly, the plot I didn't care much for, but I do like her character writing in that, and Tomb Raider 2013.
Wait, this was written by Rhianna Pratchett?
Yep.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah, so that's why the game was kind of interesting, because Rhianna managed to add a little bit of personality that made it stand out, be it the heart of Nariko, the quirkiness of Kai, or the interesting selection of villains.
Yeah, let's just say that Rhianna Pratchett has inherited her father's eye for hammy villains.
That's the reason why the game itself was really appealing to me, because at the start I was thinking, yeah, this is kind of generic, but this is where I kind of saw, I guess, the strengths of Rhianna Pratchett's writing, because before playing this game, the closest I got before this was Mirror's Edge, which, let's be honest, wasn't the best example.
Yeah, I mean, again, the characters were well written and fascinating, but the plot, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, that game was something that Rhianna Pratchett diplomatically described as a learning process for everyone, but
yeah, that's the best way to describe Mirror's Edge.
But, this is where I started to see her strength in setting up characters, and also voiceovers as well. Like, one of the things I'm going to get into in a later date, but one of the things I love in Heavenly Sword is the economy of language used in them. Like, it's simple voiceover, but it sets up a scene so effectively in just a few short words. Like, the way she describes her father, in something like, say, Metroid Other M, you have to put up with 2 bloody minutes of Samus going on and on about the backstory, explaining the deep, complicated relationship she has with him, etc., etc. Nariko sums it up with a single sentence. This is Shen. He has always been my mentor first, and my father second.
Wow. For a 2-sentence descriptor of a character, that is actually really effective.
Yeah, there are so many effective ways of summing up these characters. That's kind of what gave it the heart that made the premise come to life. So, I was interested to see how the movie would do it, because I checked the credits and Rhianna Pratchett herself was not involved in the writing. That was by Todd Farmer. And I'm gonna be honest, the movie is okay, but I realise it might be a rocky start just from the opening narration, because it kind of starts off with this basic overview of the backstory behind the Heavenly Sword, the idea that it was a evil deity, with some pretty nice looking 2D animation. But then it then explains the premise behind Nariko's character, and okay, the game starts off with Nariko narrating, in the year the fire horse, a son will be born and lead the people to glory, and then follows it up with, then I was born, and my people wept.
I'm sorry, that is so Edgar Allan Poe, I can't help but laugh.
Yeah, it's kind of like a dark sentence that kind of just sums up what a major tragedy it was. The person who introduces the narration in this is a character named Takashi, who barely has any involvement in the story. We don't even know who he is before he starts talking, and his narration is, but how surprised we were when we found out that not a boy was born, but a girl, which
that line would not be out of place in Mulan.
Yeah, it's not only less effective, but it's kind of, wow, that's the angle you go with, just kind of hyping up the surprise. It was already shaking stuff, and I'm thinking, okay, don't give it beef just yet. It's just a slight difference in wording, whatever. The story will be the same, we'll roll with it. Then we started a scene which, on paper, is a good idea. 2 members of the clan, one of them being a dude named Kyo, bullying Kai by taking away her necklace. Then Nariko shows up and literally strong arms him into giving the necklace back.
Renegade interrupts.
Basically, yeah. And Then Naruko tries to get him to apologize to Kai. And, oh man, this is so bad. Kyo then, in one of the most unnatural bits of dialogue I've ever seen, just turns around and goes, "I will not apologize to her! She is an orphan! I heard she doesn't have any blood connections with the clan, and she is incredibly strange!"
What? I'm sorry, but that dialogue makes William Shatner look like Colm Wilkinson and Philip Quast.
Yeah, but oh god, it gets worse, because he presses this for a while, and Naruko goes, "Okay, look, will you just apologize to Kai? I'm not taking orders from you! You are a curse upon the clan! I don't know why your father didn't kill you!" It's like,
oh my god, that dialogue is legitimately like the preacher in Megaton in Fallout 3.
yeah, it's just the most obvious thing. I mean, I was thinking, who talks like this? I mean, have you ever heard a bully go up to someone and go, "Dave, I despise you every fibre of my being because your homosexuality is weird to me. I haven't been educated to this and I'm unsettled by it, so stop it."
Yeah, you never hear a bully present what they're doing as, "I am ignorant, I don't like you."
Yeah, so...
Not even in Wyoming, and that's saying something.
Yeah, but this kind of sets a precedent because part of me feels mean that I'm doing this to a fandom nation, but they did say compare it with the game, and unfortunately, the movie itself is okay. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's perfectly well put together. It's just that, aside from a few adaptation decisions, which, okay, you have to make changes in a story like this, especially when you're converting a game to a movie, because, well, to be blunt, no one wants to see a movie of someone just hacking guys down for 5 hours at a time.
You never know. You haven't met Punisher fans. I will say this. I think it would be very hard for the movie to compare to the game just on the account that it doesn't include those amazing crossbow sections.
Yeah, I remembered you were a big fan of those.
The weirdest thing about those crossbow sections is that I wound up drawing more of a connection with Kai than I maybe should have, because I replayed them so many times it was like we were war companions.
For clarification of those who haven't played the game before, the crossbow sections allow you to use the 3-axis controller to guide an arrow after you shoot it.
Suffice it to say, many vasectomies were given.
Oh god.
I swear the animation team maybe put too much effort into the death animations. Like, for instance, anytime you shoot an arrow right into a soldier's ass, he will hop in place for 2 seconds and fall on his face. And suffice it to say, that entertained the hell out of 15-year-old me.
Indeed, indeed.
Moving on from that.
Yeah, the movie is okay. It makes some adaptation choices, which I'd be perfectly fine with, but when you compare it to the game, it doesn't really compare just because the writing is that much weaker. I could go on comparing all these small elements and criticizing some moments where I was just thinking, wait, what? But, I'll just sum up the movie's premise and what it does with it, and then I'm going to cover 3 key points where I think it went wrong, kind of like what I did for the Bleach review. The movie itself, the plot works fairly well at getting from A to B, and doing something slightly different from the game that makes it stand out on its own. The variation they do this time is that in what is admittedly a kind of hammy scene, considering that, again, it kind of works well on paper because Bohan decides that to get Naruko to give up the Heavenly Sword, he's going to try and break her and make it so that she has nothing left. He does this by getting his hands on exposition about her entire family history. He basically explains that the first major change is that in the game, Kai and Naruko were basically best friends forever. They had a sister-like relationship, but it was very clearly based on a strong sense of companionship, maybe in like a kindred spirit sort of way. Bohan reveals that Naruko was only born on the first month of the year of the Fire Horse. So, in order to try and get his prophecy back on track, Shen decided to go out into the world and try and find some other women he can have relationships with in order to give birth to a son. One of the children he ended up conceiving was Kai.
Mission accomplished? Good work there, Shin.
Yeah, so in this game, the two of them are biological sisters, and Bohan then reveals something which even Shen didn't know, is that apparently he did conceive a son, but the relationship wasn't a happy one, and the woman decided, you know what, screw you, I'm gonna keep the son from you and raise him myself. So it reveals the existence that there is, in fact, a chosen one somewhere out in the world. So Naruto takes the Heavenly Sword, finds Kai, and after this nice little reunion between the two of them, which was... they actually did get Kai right in this scene where Naruto says, Kai, I found out that the two of us are sisters. And Kai just casually goes, yeah, I already knew.
By the way, guys, looking at IMDb, may I just point out the fact that in this, Kai is voiced by Fluttershy, whose voice actress, I believe, was also the voice of Pinkie Pie. So that is appropriate.
Yeah. But yeah, they have a nice little reunion scene, and the core plot of the movie, whilst it eventually does retread the same plot points as the game, facing Bohan's three generals, then leading back to the final battle of the fortress, etc., the main crux of the plot is Naruto and Kai going on a journey to try and find the Chosen One so they can give the legendary sword to him. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, how does the fortress plot work then if they do find the Chosen One? And this is just slight spoiler alert, but there is one amusing element where basically they do find the Chosen One, who is this fairly badass-looking guy named Loki, and the two of them find him and explain the situation to him and give him the sword, and Loki is awestruck and goes, I am honored to have sisters like you, and I promise to fulfill this duty. He picks up the legendary sword, he holds it in the sky, there is this swelling music, and then you get this inner narration from Loki that goes, I never dreamed something like this would be possible, and now it seems like the world is open to me. And then he gets decapitated by Flying Fox.
Okay, once again looking at the cast, that is especially amazing to me, because I've made a joke about this already. Loki is voiced by Thomas Jane, aka the First Punisher.
Oh god, that's right, I forgot about that.
So, goodbye, Frank Castle.
I will admit, it's a very nice bait and switch on the Chosen One concept. The fact that ultimately it's revealed very, very quickly that Loki is very much mortal and not the Chosen One. So.
I'm suddenly reminded of The Bard's Tale.
Oh, it's bad luck to be you. A chosen one of many isn't you. When you think you're full of luck, in the bullocks you'll get struck. Oh, it's bad luck to be you.
Yeah, that nicely sums it up. So, yeah, on the bare-bones skeleton, the adapted plot works quite well, and the animation, it looks nice from a production angle, like, in terms of the cinematography, like the camera work and the lighting, it works really well. The animation, it's kind of odd. The best way I could describe the fight scenes, I would say the fight scenes are on par with Ruby. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing is up to you. That's what it reminded me of when watching this. Like, the style of motions were the same, and there's even a scene during the final battle which reminds me so much of what they do in Ruby, where the villain throws all these ravens at Naruto and they all fall into a black sphere, and then she creates a burst of light that disperses them. I'm just thinking, yeah, that is definitely something they would do in Ruby.
It's funny you should say that, because I was looking at the art style, and for some reason, even though it's nothing like Monty Ohm's signature look, I was reminded of Ruby.
You can see what I mean, right? It's just in that same way the characters are moving a little.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. Like, it's obviously a different I guess, atmosphere, but there's something really familiar about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only thing that puts me off technically is that there are times when it's either on par or slightly worse with the PlayStation 3 graphics, which is a bit unfortunate. Like, I'm usually not one to notice these things. I may have a degree in animation arts, but that was mainly due to 2D animation, because I could never get my head around CGI, I freely admit. But this was something that even my untrained mind could spot, like, wow, that fire looked really plasticky.
Yeah, I mean, honestly to me, in the scope of reviewing media with a story, graphics don't play too much of a part of it. But there's a fine line. If it distracts your attention from the story, that's an issue.
Yeah, especially since there are two weaknesses in the animations that really stick out like a sore thumb. Mainly liquid, because they can do bodies of water like lakes at an okay point, but this is a funny thing. There is a lot of stabbing, slashing, impaling going on throughout this movie, but there's very little blood. Like, there are only tiny spurts here and there, which just makes it very obvious that they only had one stock blood effect and couldn't really create any more. Nariko is cutting down the entire armies of dudes, and you just see the occasional tiny squiff going off every once in a while.
Which is in especially stark contrast with the game, in which, you know, Nariko made people explode.
Yeah, and there's also one glaring factor. You mentioned that it's bad when it's distracting. I understand that this kind of animation is complicated, especially if you're working on a tight budget. I don't know what the budget was for this, but you have to remember that art is born from adversity. You need to work around your limits, not just charge through them. This is a long way of saying, if you can't generate tears on a character model, don't do close-ups of people's faces when they're crying.
Oh god, do they really?
Yeah, like, they have the voice actors try their hardest to go, you know, to make it look like they're crying. But the character model doesn't show any tears. It's just spazzing weirdly, like, twitching in such a random way, which makes me think, why didn't you just shoot them from the back? It's even weirder as well. There's a scene which was supposed to be, like, really dramatic, because there's a moment when Kai explains what happened to her mother, and she starts to tear up, and it's, again, on paper, it's a great scene where Nariko just sort of casually wipes the tears from her eyes, except it took me a while to figure out what she was doing, because it looked like she was just sticking her thumb and rubbing it against her face.
Okay, that's kinda bad.
But yeah, that's kind of one of the big problems of Heavenly Swords, the movie, in that it's kind of structurally sound, but there are little weaknesses like that detract from it, and this kind of leads me into the key points I was talking about earlier. It ultimately comes down to character and the way the characters are expressed. And it's probably best that I cover the characters in turn, because they're all problematic for different reasons. First off, the villains. Sven mentioned that in the game, Bohan was voiced and actually portrayed by Andy Serkis, because the game used motion capture to allow the actors to, well, act.
Yeah, thus solidifying Andy Serkis' relationship with motion capture and setting him up for the writing enigma that is Emperor Snoke.
Indeed, yes. Whilst they were able to get Anna Torov, who provided the voice of Naruto in the game, to come back for the movie, apparently Andy Serkis wasn't available, so they got Alfred Molina. And don't get me wrong, Alfred Molina's a good actor, but it all kind of fell flat because, okay, one of my criticisms with Heavenly Sword is something that Sven brought up, which is the villains kind of go over the edge in terms of goofiness.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not putting that entirely on Andy Serkis' performance, but his inimitable breed of ham certainly helped.
Yeah, but all of the cast are like that, though. Like, Flying Fox had this really weird way you're showing that he was crazy by rolling out every syllable of every single sentence in weird ways. You know?
Fun fact, he was voiced by a Bond villain. That should give you an idea.
Yeah. The villains were kind of overly quirky. The movie goes in the exact opposite extreme. Bohan is so boring and humorless in this movie.
That is almost impossible for me to imagine.
Yeah, it's like they completely went the other extreme, so that in the game, Andy Serkis and, like I said, the writing goes over the top at times, but they kind of present the idea that behind all the swagger, the reason I call him Manchild is basically because he has this petulant nature to him. Like, he feels that just because he's the Lord, he deserves everything he gets. Like, he starts lusting about the Nariko as well, believing that, well, she's a woman, I've kidnapped her at this point, and she's obviously mine.
Yeah, that unfortunately happens.
Yeah, which kind of made an interesting angle for him. In the movie, Bohan is just a sort of generic Dark Lord who wants ultimate power and just goes, I will destroy your town in an effort to bring them back.
So basically he wants unlimited power but without the charm of Palpatine.
Basically, yeah. So that's already kind of boring. Like, Flying Fox manages to stay in character and isn't quite as heavy, so he manages to strike a nice balance, but you really start missing Andy Serkis' performance and Rhianna Pratchett's writing when you just have Bohan.
Yeah. Listening to your review of it, I never knew that Heavenly Sword would suffer so much without its lack of subtlety.
Well, there were subtle moments in it, just the villains weren't one of them. Then you've got some other weird directions of character as well, like, there are scenes which you had to cut out. Like, Roach has this really tragic scene in the game, and there's this one perfect scene which actually kind of sums up what you can do in motion capture that sets it apart from animation and voice acting. Is Roach, who is basically this big burly guy who is the literal bastard son of Bohan, and in the game, he is basically the victim of an abusive relationship to the point where Bohan will punish him anytime he even calls him daddy because, as he puts it, it's bad enough seeing you blot out the sun every day without being reminded that you came from my loins. So.
Yeah, again, that happens. And it's just as terrible as it sounds.
Yeah, so they have this really horrible abusive relationship, but there was this point, after you beat him in the boss fight in the game, I should mention that it takes place in this Colosseum. In one of the most tragic scenes in the game, Bohan rages at him going, You miserable failure! And throws the goblet at him. But then, it is, again, awesome moment for motion capturing, Roach just catches the gauntlet in midair and gives him this look, which shows that he's not just a muscly idiot. There is a lot of resentment, anger, and pity within this character who just seems to be taking it purely because he is his father, and that slips out for a brief moment before he starts crying in just frustration and misery. And that's not in the film, which, okay, I can understand why. It's technically a superfluous scene, and you've already got a large fight with Flying Fox, which plays out exactly like it did in the game. Okay, you skim that over. But then, what's weird is that, you know that scene at the end when Bohan, minor spoilers, Bohan loses his sight and Roach comes back to save him?
Yeah.
That still happens! Despite the fact any context has been removed, the film gives absolutely no indication. Like, Roach casually mentions, I didn't have a good childhood, but despite the fact that it seems perfectly clear that Bohan is perfectly okay with Roach, and actually, the one thing they did add in the movie is Roach is sent flying off the castle after this boss fight defeat as Bohan's returning, and Bohan yells out, No! And indicating that he does seem to be concerned about him, and they still play this scene.
Okay. I don't get that because, like you said, it's out of context with no catalyst at all.
Yeah, and then we get to the two characters who I think suffer the most in this story. That is Shen and Nariko. Now, Shen, he starts off kind of cold and almost indifferent towards Nariko, and it's even revealed that Nariko has this recurring dream of her father throwing a sword at her, and she thinks it's just this nightmare, it doesn't mean anything. And it turns out to be based from an earlier memory when Shen had thought about killing her while she was still a baby, but couldn't bring himself to do it.
Wait. Tywin?
Yeah. In the movie, oh boy. You know, I mentioned that one of the relationships was unhappy.
Yeah?
Well, Bohan very clearly states that a lot of the women Shen took were unwilling.
That's what we like to call big damage.
Really? You went the berserk route.
Yep, and it also makes one of Bohan's earlier lives in incredibly poor taste, because in order to explain why Loki's mother hid him from Shen, which should be self-explanatory at this point, Bohan says, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned."
Oh, there's Game Bohan.
Yeah, that is a really tasteless use of what is already a really bad cliche. But
Yeah, and I mean, especially for someone who in the original game was supposed to be an at least theoretically sympathetic protagonist.
yeah, because that's the thing. In the game, Shen starts off as really cold and dismissive of Nariko, but he actually turns around to be a pretty cool dude. And in fact, one of the interesting moments in the game is before the final battle, there are two speeches which we keep cutting back and forth between. Bohan, who becomes even more disgusting and depraved as the speech goes on, to the point where he utters a line that... Oh god, do I dare quote this?
I know which line this is.
Oh, there's no way of getting around it. Basically, he claims that Nariko is a raging hell beast who wants to get, and I quote, her slavering hellish jaws around my glorious genitals.
I wish we were joking. I do not know how Andy Serkis was able to get through that line with a straight face. I say straight, as if Bohan has a straight face.
Indeed. But the stark contrast was Shen was actually showing his noble side and telling the troops, okay, it's gonna be tough, but we have our wits, we have our bravery, and more importantly, we have Nariko. She has overcome the curse of the Heavenly Sword, and she has fought against the odds to save us all. We will do so again with her help. So this was actually showing that, yes, he has grown to respect and cherish Nariko, and actually says, okay, I am willing to place my faith in her. So that's a positive character growth. In the movie, Kai and Nariko find him in the prison cell and sort of confront him about the whole, you didn't tell us that we were blood sisters and you treated us like useless daughters. He focuses more on the fact that they reveal that, oh yeah, there's a son. It's like, there is a son? Ah, so there is hope after all. And Nariko says something along the lines of, yes, and you were saved by your two useless daughters. And then he says, and I quote, I did what I had to do. For the sake of the clan and the world. I will never apologize for that.
Wait, what?
Yep. He's not apologizing for the rape.
Wow! He really did go the berserk route!
Basically, yeah. And by stark contrast, just before the final battle, Nariko comes back carrying a wounded Kai, who at this point is trying to recover from a stab wound and being hung for a short time. And Shen is just continuously going, where is he? where is Loki? Where is he? And even Naruko points out, one of your daughters is on the verge of death right now.
Wow!
And Shen continues with this, and then when he finds out Loki is dead, he just goes, oh, this is very bad. We better fortify the defenses. And Naruko says, don't worry, I'm going to defend the fort. And Shen goes, you seriously mean to fight for yourself? That's madness, there's too many of them. Which...
Have you not been paying attention?
And this leads into Naruko herself. In that same scene, it kind of confirms for me something that, I don't know, Todd Farmer, he might be a cool guy, but I honestly don't think he got what the game was about. You can make as many adaptations of the word as you want, as long as you preserve the spirit. That's basically my general law with adaptations or localization or anything like that. Change as many words as you like, as long as you keep the spirit of what the story was trying to say and who the characters are. In the game, it's basically about starting off as this cold, overly serious warrior who she's basically focusing on nothing but the fighting and her duties, because that's honestly all she has. In fact, Brianna Pratchett said in an interview that she based Naruko on a quote from Conan, where, oh, I really wish I could remember the character's name, but a warrior woman saying that she often walks by huts at night, which are filled with couples sharing their warmth, and she's just forced to walk by. Essentially saying that to become a warrior, she had to abandon any semblance of family and companionship, and the game is essentially about her rediscovering that to the point where she overcomes the curse of the Heavenly Sword, basically out of stubbornness of, I can't die now, not while so many people are depending on me.
Yeah, and that was pretty much the draw of her character.
Indeed. The movie goes in the reverse direction. I mentioned Kyo, the exposition bully, and Naruko saves him when he's being attacked by Bohan's assassins. And in true to form, Kyo goes, you saved me! Why? After everything I said to you!
Really?
Yeah, and Naruko just blandly explains, I consider every member of the clan to be my family. I will do everything I can to protect them. Which, yeah, it's kind of on par, a bit blunt, but on par, good setup for the character. And then the movie slowly degrades that because obviously Loki dies, and Shen proves himself to be an even bigger arsehole. And then, just before the final battle, when he asks Naruko, why are you doing this? Naruko says, and I quote, I am fighting to protect Kai. She is the only family I have.
Wow. Speaking of darkness-induced audience apathy, draining your characters of sympathy.
Yeah, that's really the basic problem with that, because like I said, Naruko is the heart of it, and they really did not get a character at all, because on top of the reverse character development, Anna Trov, she gives a really great performance in Heavenly Sword, because Naruko is kind of a hard character to do, because there is a lot of emotional tension in her, but aside from voiceovers, it's rarely spoken about. In the movie, she has nothing to work with. It's just generic action lines like, you think slaughtering civilians is funny? Let's see you laugh when I tear your guts out.
Wow! The movie has degraded these characters so much that even the actors have stopped caring.
Yeah, in fact, there's actually kind of one bad example. I don't know whether it's just due to bad direction or little effort on Anna's part, but they repeat the moment when Flying Fox hands Kai in front of Naruko, and upon seeing someone who she has recently found out is her biological sister being brutally murdered, Naruko's reaction to the movie is, no!
Wow! It's like she turned in the opposite performance of Kyo.
Yeah, and what's even funnier about that moment is that to try and hype it up a bit, the character model hunches over in pain with her mouth hanging open awkwardly in what is supposed to be a big no, but it doesn't match the voice acting at all.
Wow.
But yeah, that's kind of the sad part of it, because like I said, the movie itself, from like an animation and structural standpoint, it's a perfectly okay film. It's just that in the adaptation, a lot of the character and heart of the story was lost. So, yeah, it's a film which I would only recommend to fans of Heavenly Sword if they're curious, because on its own as a standalone film, I don't think there's really enough there to interest a casual audience. They would just think, oh, it's a generic martial arts film. Why did people like this again?
Yeah, and listening to your review, honestly, I'm probably going to avoid it because if we're talking about cheesy video games, Heavenly Sword is the gigantic 800-pound ball of Gouda in the room. But
okay, that's fair.
But that to me is its charm. So to hear that the adaptation kind of drains it of that spirit, I honestly don't see the enjoyment there would be in it for me.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it's really only if you want a comparison between the two, like I was doing, that, you know, to end this on a positive note, despite all I've said, I am actually glad I've had the opportunity to see this movie thanks to the fan donation. And the reason I say that is because there are times when you take good writing for granted. You just think, oh, this is good, I enjoy it, and you never really think about why. This movie kind of reminded me what the strengths of Heavenly Sword were, what I actually liked about it in the first place. I guess it's, you know, that old adage, you don't know what you had until you lose it. This is kind of what reminded me that, okay, yeah, this is what I liked about Heavenly Sword. This is what a good writer like Rhianna Pratchett can indeed bring to the table, because the reason why cliches are bad is not because they're overused, it's because people use them without thinking. They use it as a shorthand of, oh, I can't be bothered, let's just say, magical sword, that's what people want, so the villain is evil, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, all comparisons between the Heavenly Sword film adaptation and the game aside, I think another very good example of that rule in progress is Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, which is cliched beyond all belief, but it still works because they thought of how they were using their tropes.
Exactly, yeah. So, if nothing else, I guess it kind of reminds me, both as a member of the audience and a creator, sometimes what truly makes something come alive is when you add that little bit of yourself in order to bring something to life. So, yeah, for reminding me of why that's so important, I am glad I saw this movie. I doubt I'll watch it again, mind you, but...
Oh gee, I wonder why.
But I'm glad I at least saw it once.
And I'm glad you reviewed it because it's just reminded me of how much I appreciated Heavenly Sword despite everyone taking the mickey out of it. Also, it's given me the urge to write a death battle between Ashnard and Bohan, so I'm gonna go do that.
That would actually be pretty good, actually.
We can discuss this later.
But for now, we have a show to wrap up, and we do that with our final section, which is Quickfire Reviews! With vampires that sparkle! That should get us some views, yes!
In the words of Crisp and Freeman, didn't we once call those fairies? I like fairies!
This is a section where we review everything else we've read, watched, or played, but within the maximum time limit of 60 seconds. Okay, I have 2 games I quickly want to review.
First off, Rodea the Sky Soldier. I wanted to like this because it looked like a spiritual successor to Night into Dreams, but my god, it's boring. The premise was generic, but it looked like there was something interesting going on for the first 5 minutes, but then we had a forced tutorial section which introduced the horrible controls, and then, after about 5 minutes, the main character has all of his memory wiped and becomes a generic robot. Yay.
Wow. Plot convenient amnesia in the worst possible form.
Basically, yeah. And the final game I'm reviewing?
Saints Row 2. Yeah, I know this is completely out of character for me, but I thought, hey, I might as well give it a try. I mean, I'm not too big a fan of crime stuff, but I'm told it takes itself a lot less seriously, so I might enjoy it. And yeah, the gameplay itself is well crafted. I did like exploring the town, and I also did like the bits of comedic stuff in there, like the fact that if you mess with one too many old ladies, they can pepper spray you. But at the same time, whilst I understand the charm of the game, it's still not for me because I still have the reaction of, I am brutally murdering people.
Okay, if you take issue with that bit in the second game, I cannot recommend Saints Row 4 enough. Because that's about the time the series gives up and becomes DBZ.
Oh, okay.
And it goes so hard fantasy sci-fi that throughout the game you are just murdering people in a simulation who don't actually exist.
Yeah.
Also evil aliens, one of whom, don't quote me on this, but I think he might actually be voiced by Andy Serkis. I'll have to look into it.
Right, either way, I might have to check it out with that one at this stage, because I understood the goofy charm, and there was a lot of witty lines in Saints Row 2. It's just, I couldn't get over the fact that I was basically just mowing down police officers who were doing their job at the end of the day.
Yeah, knowing that, you'll appreciate 4, because it is the distillation of everything silly about the Saints Row series, and it's pretty much just guilt-free carnage.
Okay, I'll definitely look into that one then. And with that ends our spooky-ish kind of sort of whatever version of Monkey Broadcast.
Scary skeletons.
Thank you for listening to the show, and if you have any questions or comments, by all means share them with us. That's what the comment section is for. But until next time, I've been the Jonin Monkey.
And I've been Sven the Crusader, reminding you once again that there are no lands too spoopy for the Jonin Monkey channel.
That was Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show hosted by the Jonin Monkey and Sven the Crusader. If you feel you've been the subject of slander or that your copyright was misused, send an email to thejoninmonkey@yahoo.co.uk. For more news and media reviews, follow me on Twitter @thejoninmonkey, and go to thejoninmonkey.popping.com for previous podcasts and MP3 downloads. All music used belongs to the original owners. Until next month, have fun, kids!